Well, let me go ahead and introduce Shawnee Baker, and we are just delighted to have you tonight for our Reincarnation Book Club.
Thank
Um,
you.
it's a pleasure to have you and to share your story with our group. I just want to do a brief introduction. You're originally from Canada.
Yes, Toronto.
And yeah, and I don't know Canadian accent, so I would never be able to tell that from talking to you, but now you're in the United States up in the Northeast. Many years as a registered nurse, and even your story about putting yourself through school and working those long hours and how that affected your relationships, your marriage,
Hmm.
and raising your children, your three children from your first marriage.
Yeah.
And I love how candid you were about the challenges you faced in your relationships, ending in two divorces. But I'm happy to report that you're happily married now. It feels like a gift that you found Scott and are now living in the Northeast.
Hmm.
And and with all of life's ups and downs, you face one of the most horrific challenges that a parent can face, and that is losing your daughter. But before we get into that part of the story, I wanted to ask you about, have you introduced Baylie to us? She seems like such a remarkable woman, I guess I should say. And, I thought part of her personality really shined for me in that she claimed the way to spell her name. So let's start right there. When did she do that? And do you know why she did that?
Oh gosh, it would have been in high school at some point. I couldn't tell you which year it was. It was early on. I'm probably right as soon as she started high school, I would say her junior year. She wanted to change the spelling of her name to what would be more unique and representative of herself, her own wishes. And so I allowed her to do that if she wanted to spell it that way. I thought perhaps it was a phase and maybe she would outgrow it. But that's what she continued to do. And she signed her papers that way in school. And we just embraced it for her.
That's wonderful. Unique is a great way to put it, isn't it? Her life, her whole persona seemed to just embrace a uniqueness. I
Mhm.
almost felt like she, on some level, knew things that someone at that age wouldn't really know. Um, so tell us uh, a little bit more about when her um, horsemanship, I guess you call it.
Yeah.
Um, that was something she was quite proud of.
Yes, very early on. Baylie was a very intuitive soul. From the time she was a very little girl, she could read people far better than I could. She could pick up on energy in a room. She could pick up on things. She would suggest things to me about people that would surprise me. And I would say, gosh, why do you feel that way? What do you think? And she'd say, I can sense that about them. So she was always very mature and very intuitive, very a sensitive person. She could feel things. She was emotionally um, advanced, I guess, I don't know what else to call it. But when she started riding, she was about 7 years old, and her connection with horses was immediate. She fell in love with the horses, and she would stand with horses and just communicate with them for a long time. By the time she was 12, she was quite engaged in the equestrian community and really doing well with jumping and dressage. And we got her a horse. And she would be at the barn at 5 in the morning, stay at the barn until 7:30, quarter to 8, head off to school, and go right back to the barn to be with her horse at 4 o'clock and stay till after dinner time. We'd be saying, Baylie, you got to come home from the barn. but she wanted to be with that horse all the time, and they had an incredible connection. I used to say they communicated telepathically because, boy, they didn't she didn't need to speak. She just stood by the horse, looked at the horse, he looked at her, he knew what she wanted. It was amazing to watch.
I felt that too. And, that connection, it just felt so, innate with her. Where some people wrestle with that, they think, how do I do this? No, it felt just so innate with her. And so, to me, that would be like a gift she brings into this world. And then when you moved to the US and she was training here, and there was a story about how she got into the school, Kent School, I believe it was.
Right. There were so many, and I've often thought I should take the time to go back further and see what things showed up as a child. So I met my husband Scott. Baylie and I were living in Concord, Carlisle, Massachusetts, and she was going to high school there, which was an excellent school. But Scott lived up here on the seacoast in New Hampshire, and we were moving into Scott's home, and the local high school here was not of the quality that where she was at Concord, Carlisle. So we started looking at private schools. And Scott asked Baylie if she wanted to go to a private school, where would she want to go? And she brought it up and said, you know what? I'd really like to go to a boarding school. And we said, you're kidding. And she said, no. She said, my dream since I was a little girl is to go to a boarding school that has horses. So I guess when she was quite young, she read uh, chapter books about these girls who, and I can't remember the name of the books, but it was a series of books about girls who were in a riding academy who went off to school and they had their horses at this school. So they started doing research looking at different schools, and Kent came up where they have an equestrian facility, and you can either take your horse with you or you can have a horse that you ride while you're there. So this came up. She talked to Scott about it. They applied. Scott had some connections through the school with a friend of his who called the school. We'd already missed the admission process. They called, they said, we really need to try to get Baylie into this school. They said, we'll make an exception. We'll do an interview for Baylie after the admissions was completed. So Baylie passed that. She did well in her interview. She had been valedictorian of her class. She had great marks, but this is another level, this boarding school. Anyway, she got in, and I was looking through the emails because we were supposed to go down for a parent weekend, and Scott was asking me, when is the weekend? So I put in Kent in my search bar, and lo and behold, an email comes up for Kent School in Connecticut from 2010. I married Scott in 2015. We weren't even living in the US in 2010. We were in Toronto. And I'm reading this email, and it's from Baylie had asked me, which we had forgotten. She had said to me back then, I mean, she must have been 12 years old, maybe younger. Can you get a scholarship to a riding academy? And we had contacted Kent looking for, an application to see if we could get a scholarship to go to that school. And there had been communication back and forth. We had filled out the application and nothing had come from it. So she had already been in contact with this school. 5 years later, she's attending it. It was really, it was something.
And that's not the only one.
No.
So something similar happened when she went chose University of Miami. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, she had had that on her dream board for quite some time. So, not quite as impressive as finding an email that was dated 5 years earlier before we ever met Scott, ever lived in the US, and ever had any possible connection to Kent School. But yeah, that she had pictures of the University of Miami, pictures of the riding team, pictures of the facilities, and of course, when she was accepted to the University of Miami, it was just a no-brainer. And she got in on the equestrian team at the University of Miami, and that was, I mean, for her, it was like, Mom, this is what I've always wanted. It's on my dream board. Of course, I'm going. Yeah, and of
Wow.
course, it was the one school she got the biggest scholarship for. So really was no question.
I can't even imagine that University of Miami has an equestrian club. That blew my mind, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised. But so she's now in college, and then the unthinkable happens.
Yeah. So
And
her first year was wonderful.
hmm,
No red flags. Everything was going well. Through the summer, there was some intuition there. She had gone away. She wanted to go into neuroscience, and she had taken 8 extra college credits at the local university here, University of New Hampshire, um, to get those physics credits, which she didn't need to do, but she wanted to be ahead of things and to bring her GPA up higher. She knew organic chemistry was coming and it would be a tough one, and she thought it would lighten her load a little bit. But after she completed the program, I remember just before going off to school, she said to me, Mom, this may be my last year at the University of Miami. And I said, Really? And she said, Yeah. She said, I just have a bad feeling, and I think maybe it's time for me to change schools. Maybe I shouldn't be in Miami anymore. And then, as soon as I dropped her off, not a week later, the tragedy occurred.
and for those of you who have not read the book, Baylie was hit in an automobile accident. She was walking on the road, but can you give us some of the circumstances that led up to that accident?
Yeah,
I've got grandchildren in college, and so that touched me very deeply. Also,
yeah,
one grandchild in college, one getting ready to go to college,
yeah.
and so talk about that. I think people need to hear that story.
So, as I mentioned, Baylie was very mature, very responsible, really level headed kid. She was not the girl out partying. She was the one taking the extra college credits and working 3 jobs through the summer. She just didn't go out like that. So she was in the sorority Zeta Chi Alpha, but it was a sorority that we really approved of because a lot of the medical students were in this sorority. It was really like an academic. Um, it was just, they were lovely girls. And it wasn't the same stereotype that the sororities typically have. So this one we're quite happy with. She said to me, "You know what, Mom? It's my first weekend back at college, and I'm not going to get a chance to go out or do anything. I'm going to have to really put my nose to the grind and work hard this year because in the neuroscience program, you have to keep your GPA very high." And so she said, "It's a 21st birthday party this weekend. I'm going to go out with the sorority girls and I'm just going to have some fun and that'll be it." And I said, "Okay, I understand. Just please be very careful, but enjoy yourself." I mean, it's college. I get it. She's in her sophomore year. I really didn't think anything else of it. I thought she would have a nice evening and that would be it. So Baylie went out on the Saturday night. I left. We'd been there for a week. I dropped her off, set up her dorm room. I left Thursday night. We went on a sailboat. Um, with friends. We do it every year. We went off the coast of Maine and we were gone overnight. We would go for a week. So we left on the Friday. Saturday, I spoke to her on the phone from the sailboat. Saturday night, I lost service. That's when she told me she was going out. She went out that Saturday evening with the girls. They ended up downtown Miami at a club, underage in a bar. Um, they reported that Baylie had been drinking water. She had had some drinks earlier in the day, but at this club, she was only drinking water. She says to the girls, "You know what? I've had enough. I think I'm going to head back to the dorm." No one else wanted to leave. So A boy at a club across from them had been texting her and said, I'll come out and meet you and we'll go together. It was his 21st birthday. That's the one that she had gone out. They had all gone out together. And she said to the girls, I'm going to meet Will on the sidewalk and we're going to get a ride share together. She went outside. He didn't show up. He sent a text and said, change my mind. So she's alone now. She can't get back in the club with the girls. She calls for a ride share, waiting for her ride share. She's approached by two young men who tell her they're med students at the University of Miami, and they're chatting. And evidently, they tell her quite a few details about the school, different dorm room, different. It sounds to her like this is fairly legit, and she's happy to meet these young men because they're in the med program. And they say, our ride share is right here. We're headed back to the dorm. Why don't you just hop in rather than wait for yours? Yours is going to take longer. We'll share the cost. We're going to the same place. She agrees, cancels her ride share, jumps in with them. They're not med students. They're in their 30s. The one owns two different drug shops. They both were involved in dealing drugs, we later found out. Bailey's sitting in the middle of the back seat between the two men, and they go in the wrong direction. She starts texting her friends, I'm with some sketchy guys. I don't know where we're going. We're lost. We're supposed to go back to campus, but we're lost. The rideshare stops, and one of the men get out. Says he's going to get some water. Goes to a variety store to open the door, but then looks back. He's on camera. There's a camera on the street, and he takes the door handle behind the variety store and goes upstairs to an apartment. Comes back with a solo cup of water for Baylie, red cup, open lid with a straw, and gives it to her. Much to her surprise, I'm sure she was imagining a Dasani from the store. But now she's got this water. She's texting her girlfriends again. They won't give me their real names. And they're trying to get me to drink the water. Too much, she says in the text. And the girls are saying, get out of there, Baylie, get out of the ride share, get away from them. And we don't know how much water she consumed, but she did drink some of it. Perhaps they were pressuring her to drink it. Nobody knows because the questioning was done so poorly by the police. And the rideshare, the Uber driver, didn't speak any English. But she spills the water in the back seat, and that makes the driver angry. And he pulls over and says, everybody out. You're going to have a $250 cleaning charge to the guy who gave her the water. He says, that's fine, no problem. He's already got his credit card, so he's going to be charged. And despite that, the man is not angry at Baylie. Instead, he goes into another club and comes out with yet another water, reaches into his pocket, an umbrella is blocking it, and he goes to give her another water, which to me, had this girl, you don't know her, just cost you $250 for a cleaning charge, what urgency is there for you to go get another water for her? Mm-hmm. The rideshare was booked for a 5-mile loop. We were later contacted by the Sex Trafficking Coalition of Miami, who felt that Baylie had been taken as an abduction, that there was a attempted sex trafficking for her, that 2 other students from the University of Miami had been also taken on a 5-mile loop, given a drugged water, and woke up at the hotel across from the airport. So they were aware of it. So our issue with all of this and the evidence that was gathered and the questioning afterwards, which all kinds of questioning that was, each suspect lied. You know, the 2 men had different stories. Why did you go to your upstairs to get the water? And he tells police, I forgot my cell phone. If you got your cell phone, how did you order the ride share? How did you get the Uber? It just went on and on, the lies. Long and short, we never were able to prove it because we didn't have the Rufinol in Bailey's system, despite the police who suspected it was there. And they went scot-free. And, the girls who were taken to woke up in the hotel room on the same rideshare loop, those stories were never revealed either because the girls didn't want to press charges. They were embarrassed and they didn't want to talk about it. So these kind of things happen and nothing's done and nothing's said and there's no warning. It's a failure to warn, failure to tell parents and kids what's going on.
Yeah, you do quite a bit of expose about all of that, which must have been really challenging for you. And then it gets worse. Then you're faced with how to deal with someone who's no longer a minor in the hospital needing care. And I bring this up because we'll share also later about Bayley's Wish Foundation.
Mhm.
That challenge that you experienced in the hospital, you've turned it into something that can be productive. So explain a little bit about what you went through because of her age, because of not having the paperwork that would
Right.
allow you to be able to make decisions for her. Um,
So at 8 o'clock in the morning on Sunday morning, when I woke up to have my coffee on the back of the sailboat, I checked my phone. I had a signal. I sent a text message to Baylie and it immediately bounced back. And I thought, gosh, that's strange. I have a signal. Why is it bouncing back? And with that, the phone rang and it said Miami-Dade Police Department. I answered the phone and the officer said, "Are you Mrs. Baker? Are you Bailey's mom?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "We've had 2 police cars in your driveway all night. I'm so sorry to call you this way." And that was a red flag if there wasn't one. I thought, my God, why are you parked in my driveway? And he said, Baylie is alive, but he said, she's been in a terrible accident and you need to come to Miami immediately. Of course, I said, "What happened? What do you mean she's been in an accident? I can't tell you anything over the phone, but you need to come to Miami immediately." "Well, did she break her leg? Did she hit her head? What do you mean? Is she okay? What kind of an accident?" "I'm so sorry. I wish I could tell you more," he says. "I'll give you the name of the hospital and you can speak to the surgeon. She's in the hospital." So I get the number, hang up the phone, run down to my husband who's just getting up, and I'm shaking and hysterical and confused. And I said, "You got to call him back. I must not have understood." He says, "What kind of an accident? Why doesn't he tell you?" I said, "I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what." They won't say. So my husband calls, gets the same story, gets the phone number for the hospital, phones the hospital. The surgeon's still in surgery. Ask if we can speak to the nurses, and they won't give us any information, nothing. So finally, it felt like ages, but it must have been maybe half an hour later where we spoke to the surgeon. And um, he said, "Do you have a medical proxy?" And we said, "No." "What is that?" And he said, "Well, Baylie is over the age of 18. I'm limited in what information I can give you. She's been in surgery all night. Um, she is critical, and you need to come to Miami immediately." "What kind of surgery?" He wouldn't even tell us. We didn't even know it was neurosurgery. We had no idea. And then I said, "Can I speak to her?" And he said, "No, you can't speak to her right now, but you need to come to Miami." My husband said, "We're on a boat 3 hours offshore. We have to get the boat back. We have to get a flight. Do we have time to stop and pack some clothes?" And he said, "No, let me put it this way. You may be coming to say goodbye to your daughter." So with that, we understood loud and clear and got to shore as quickly as possible.
wow. Takes a moment to take all of that in. And even with your background as a nurse, in one sense, I think you probably handled it way better than I would without any kind of medical knowledge. But on another hand, um, you could see the shortcomings of not being able to communicate. And so that had to be so very challenging for you.
It was awful. We were 16 hours before we finally got to her bedside. 11 p.m. at night, we arrived in Miami. The waiting room was full of students. There had to have been 50 kids in that waiting room, if not more. And we went through them all and went into um, the ICU. It says neuro ICU. So now we know she's in the neuro unit. She's hit her head. And we went through the doors, and there she is. She's in a coma. She's on full life support. Her body, I would say, was 3 to 4 times the size that it should be, with swelling. Her head, her shoulders, her neck. I mean, she was just, the swelling was unlike anything I'd ever seen. The bruising, it was horrendous. And, I'm crying. And the nurse came in and she said, I'll try to find the doctor to come and talk to you. And they were very transparent once we were there because we were next of kin. So at that point, we were allowed to know everything. And the surgeon did tell us, this is what happened. She's been in a 9-hour surgery. These are the injuries she has. These are all the bleeds in her brain. You know, she has a C1, C2 fracture. We don't know if it's severed her spinal cord. We don't know if she's fully paralyzed. Her pelvis is broken. Her back is broken. Internal injuries. She was cut from sternum right through to her groin. She was gaping open with packing. They couldn't close her for the swelling. They'd gone in to try to stop all the internal bleeding, but they couldn't close her up. It was horrific. So we felt informed and we felt validated as her parents at that time, sitting at her bedside. The following morning, the police came in. Again, it was probably around 8 in the morning. They came in and asked to speak to us, and they said, we have reason to believe that there was foul play involved with Baylie's accident. And we said, what do you mean? And they said, this is the city it happens. We've seen this time and time again. And the video surveillance shows your daughter walking in a zombie-like state. We think she's been drugged. She does not walk like a drunk person. And we were kind of shocked. We said, well, he said, she just completely ignored. So, like, cars are coming up right at her hip, laying on the horn, flashing their lights at her. She doesn't even turn and look at them. She doesn't startle. It doesn't give any reaction at all, as though she didn't even hear the horn. Swerving around her, she just keeps walking like an out of body. There were 2 witnesses to the event who said, I've never seen anything like it. She walked like she was out of body and completely unaware. So the Rohypnol impairs all sensory input. So the stories of young men walking in front of a train because they can't hear the train. So we were highly suspect at that time. We went back into the ICU and asked if toxicology had been drawn. Had they done alcohol and drug levels on her? And we were told that in the state of Florida, it is a standard policy not to draw blood or alcohol levels on a trauma patient because insurance companies deny the claim, which we could not believe what we were hearing. And then we said, well, we want it drawn. And they said, well, I'm very sorry, but we'll have to get the ethics committee involved. You see, Baylie is 18. And because she's an adult, she may not want you to know that there were drugs and alcohol involved. And if you would like to be her guardian, you can go and apply for guardianship in front of a judge. So all of this is just like, what? What do you mean guardianship? Wait a minute, I'm her mother. What are you talking about? Why do I need guardianship? Like, it just completely caught me off guard. And then she said, we'll get the ethics committee to come and speak to you because they currently are representing your daughter. And that's when the light bulb went on for me that the ethics committee had control and guardianship of Baylie, not me.
Mm.
Yeah, that was salt to the wound. It really was. So we went back to the police and said, you need to order it. And they said, oh, we thought it was drawn. Again, it's just mind blowing, the incompetence. But anyway, they spoke to the physicians and said, we need this ordered. We need blood and alcohol. So it went over and above the ethics committee and the order went through, but it was too late. It was 36 hours later and there was nothing in her blood. It was all gone.
Wow. At one point during the time in Miami, you went to her room and uh, finding the book that she had on her nightstand. That it
Right,
almost feels miraculous.
right,
Uh, Finding that book, that she had that book.
right, right.
Tell us about that.
I will tell you about that. If I can just touch on one last thing,
Yes, please.
back to the not having, just for parents understanding the importance of this paperwork. We knew neurosurgeons and different people in New York and Boston who had said, send us the scans. We need a second opinion for your daughter. We asked for medical records and we were denied, again, because she was over the age of 18. So,
Mm.
as parents, we couldn't send her CT and MRI to get a second opinion. So, we went to her dorm room the first week that she was there. The college had come over and student affairs officer had spoken with us and asked us if we wanted them to pack up Bailey's dorm room and send everything home and credit her tuition and all these things, which again, it was just so overwhelming. And we went over to see her dorm room before they packed it up and walk through her space and see what she had done and where she had last been, and her jean jacket thrown on her bed and all of her last moments. And on the nightstand is a book, and it says Into the Gray Zone. And I picked up the book and I looked at it, and it said, it's Into the Gray Zone. What is this? I'm so sorry. I can't even believe I forget it. But the subtitle of it is by Dr. Adrian Owen, and it's about being trapped in a coma. Um, and it was about people who are trapped in a coma and conscious. So I opened the book, and the bookmark page that she is on is about a 19-year-old girl who was hit by a car and is in a coma. And the doctors studying this are doing a trial test called the functional MRI. A functional MRI was the first clinical trial test done. It was done in the UK and in Canada before it was done here. And it was a test done to detect awareness that could not otherwise be detected at the bedside. So, what they do basically is speak to someone in a coma under MRI to see if any areas of the brain are lighting up to the voice of the person asking the questions. So that in itself was shocking. So I read the book from cover to cover while we were in the ICU, and I learned an awful lot about consciousness and about understanding what happens to us. Where are we? How our souls are, for lack of a better term, trapped inside of bodies that aren't working, and how that communication between loved ones still, whether it was telepathically, no one can really understand how, but even the physician studying it, Dr. Adrian Owen, he was blown away by the studies he had done and witnessed in the caregivers of the patients, because there was absolutely no way to know they were in there, and yet their mothers knew. Their mothers knew they were there. And this became sort of a guide for us. It really helped me understand what Baylie was trying to say and what she wanted. So fast forward the clock, 4 weeks later, we finally get Baylie transferred to Mass General. When we got to Mass General, the physician she's admitted under, Dr. Brian Eblow, is the only physician in the United States studying consciousness on patients who are in a coma and doing the first clinical trial of a functional MRI. Baylie became the first patient in the United States to have that clinical trial done.
Amazing. That's so amazing. You can't make this stuff up.
Right. Which is why Dr. Eblow wrote the foreword for the book on consciousness. When we showed him the book, he really couldn't believe it. He said, "You've got to be kidding me." And the bookmark where she was, and he read the page and he said, "We just got a grant for this. I know, Dr. Adrian Owen. We finally just got approval for this."
Yeah,
It
of
was just
all the
mind blowing.
hospitals. Yeah.
And he was the only physician. I mean, there's a whole bunch of neurosurgeons at Mass General, but he's the one that's running the clinical trial who we who ends up being Bailey's doctor.
Yeah, it's things like that that make me feel like, you know, even through tragedy, that something is being orchestrated for a purpose that we might not understand, but it sure feels like something like that is going on. And you mentioned that Dr. Owen said he felt like the mothers knew. Did you
Yes.
feel that way when you were sitting beside Baylie?
Did I felt like I knew she was already gone and needed to go. I had this overwhelming feeling of stop, treatment, let her go. She needs to go. Let her go. I didn't feel like she was there. I couldn't communicate with her. But at the end of the functional MRI, it's because her soul was not inside of her body anymore. She was not conscious inside of a broken body that
Mm,
didn't work. She was hanging on by a thread, if you will. That's very hard to explain, but as though she were wanting to let go.
yeah.
Um, Whereas these other mothers, there was this strange communication that they had. They would even say, you know, this one boy who had been in a motorcycle accident who they believed was in a coma for years and years. And the mother would say, no, he'd like you to cover him up. He's cold. And they would say, what are you talking about? He can't communicate. But after observing this quite a bit, you know, Dr. Owen believed the mother that she did have a sense of knowing that others didn't.
Yeah. I kind of had the sense that you had the understanding she was ready to move on, but she held out to be able to have that last few moments with her brothers.
Yeah, again, you know, there was so much involved with our case, you know, whether it was the paranormal or mediums reaching out to us, strange messages coming forth to us. I was in touch with a grief counselor early on because when we understood what the medical error was at the Miami hospital, again, without having that second opinion, we didn't know how catastrophic her injuries were when we transferred her to Boston. And so that very first meeting with all the neurosurgeons around the table, when they said to us, I'm so sorry, but your daughter has a significant brainstem bleed that was missed in Miami. And we said, what do you mean? And they said, it was there all along. It was there on the very first scan. I don't know why they didn't see it, but she should never have been saved. Heroic measures have been taken that should not have been. And had this happened here, we would have let her go. So here we were, 6 weeks in. We find out about these catastrophic injuries, which give her, well, so with the direct hemorrhage, which is the brainstem injury, she had a 1% chance of survival. With the injuries she had had in Miami, it was a 7% chance of survival. But with the two combined, it was, they had never had a case of anyone with the two injuries combined who had lived. She would have been the first. And what would that ever look like? They said it would be very poor. They said she would never open her eyes again. She would never move her body. She would probably never respond to touch. She would never speak. She probably would never hear us and be completely bedridden and vegetative for the rest of her life.
Yeah. And then as we move forward in her story, and you know, I can't imagine what it took for you to come to terms with her loss, but I really love the point where you got to this place of bargaining with her soul about, and I know this may sound strange to some, but to ask her specifically, you've got to give me a clear sign. And I love that part of the story. So tell us about that.
Was that with the bluebirds or was
Uh-huh.
that? Yeah. I knew it was time to let her go. There was no question about it. A year prior to this, we'd had a conversation, and Baylie had said to me, "You know, Mom, there's something worse than dying." And I said, "What is that, Baylie?" And she said, "Being trapped in a body that doesn't work.
Mm.
Don't ever let that happen to me." And I said, "Baylie, I won't. Don't let that happen to me." "Oh, Mom," she said, "I think it would be the worst thing. I will never let that happen." And I never thought of it again. And here we were. So I knew those words haunted me. That conversation was there every day for me. And I told her, I said, "Baylie, there's nothing left. It's time to go. You need to fly with the angels. You need to go. Let go on your own so we don't have to let you go." And I said, "And when you get there, you need to send me bluebirds. Don't send me a cardinal. Don't send me butterflies. Send me bluebirds." Year before, Baylie and I wanted bluebirds in the yard. So we did everything to get these bluebirds. We researched it. We put this birdhouse facing east and we got the right bird. And we bought live worms and we put these live worms in the fridge and we put them outside every day. We couldn't get bluebirds to save our lives. And we were so frustrated with it. Well, lo and behold, Baylie died that year. And we were going for a walk around Christmas time, and we passed a tree completely covered in bluebirds. There had to have been 100 bluebirds on the tree. And that spring, a bluebird house in front of our window in the kitchen, there's a nest of bluebirds. They came and they had a nest, and they come every year, and we have bluebirds.
I love that. It reminded me of the book Illusions. You know, there's a blue feather on the cover of that book, and
Mm,
so I needed that reminder about the bluebirds, and so I love that, you know, the contrast between them not being there and then just hundreds of them, you know, as if on cue with her command. It
mhm.
was just really beautiful, and that's a great segue into some of the experiences that you've had with mediums. Now, one way before you even moved to Boston, tell us a little bit about that one because this will be the teaser for what happens down the road.
Oh, I've had so many, and I'm trying to recall the specific because I've had some when I was 28 years old that said I would write a book one day and I wouldn't always be a nurse. And I had them tell me that I would have twin girls when I was
Yeah,
finished
that's the one
having
I
my
was thinking
family.
of. Yeah.
And I thought, gosh, never in a million years. I've already had three children. I can't imagine having any more. And another one where Baylie had been with me, and they warned Baylie that there would be a dangerous situation with young men that she needed to be aware of.
Mm.
And again, here's a young girl. You could you could say that to any young girl. You could give that message to any young girl. Um, but I'll never forget it. They said it's very dangerous and it's a group of young men and you need to stay away from them.
Mm.
But yes, the twin girls and it kept coming up. It would always come up. It would come up again and again. But then there was Baylie in a coma. I'd reached out to this grief counselor before Baylie actually died because I knew where we were going. And the trauma centers and the hospitals, despite how critical these situations are, they don't have therapists for the families. They
Mm.
don't have anybody who comes and talks to you. It's just insane. So here I was pregnant. I'm about to deliver Savannah in 3 months. And my daughter and best friend is dying. And I have no resource, no therapist, no one to talk to. So this grief counselor comes to talk to me. And after a couple of times I had met with her, she sends me a message and she says, "I don't know what your religion is or if you're open to this at all." But she said, "One of my past clients has reached out to me. She's a medium, and she says she described you, and she said there's a woman trying to say goodbye to her daughter and she hasn't left yet. but her daughter um, is trying to let go. So she describes the scenario. She draws a picture, gives it to the grief counselor to give to me. It's a picture of Baylie in a long blue dress with long blonde hair. She describes her as being early 20s. And she says one of her brothers will not let go. And this is what's holding her back. She can't cross over until she knows he's okay. So my middle son, he was 21 at the time, Tristan, the woman drew a picture of him. She said, this tall, tall, skinny boy, blonde hair, glasses. It's my son.
Mm.
And he had this mystical belief that they could put computer chips in brains in China and maybe they could keep her alive long enough to find a way to reboot her brain or something. So that was he was our hardest one to come around because of being young and just not wanting to let go.
And then you had a mediumship reading with Phil Quinn, who's an evidential medium, and so he was able to give you some really detailed information. I love what in that message that he gave you, he talked about a message about the baby.
Right. So the summer that Baylie went off to school at her final year, her sophomore year, just before we left, um, there were 4 embryos. We had done IVF, and there was 1 male and 3 females, and we had implanted a male and a female. I was pregnant with Savannah. We had lost the male, and Baylie was in awe looking at these embryos, and she said to me at the kitchen table in front of Scott, Mom, if something ever happens to me, I'm coming back as one of these embryos. And I said, Baylie, why would you say that? And she said, Mom, I'm just telling you, I will come back. These babies are going to have a wonderful life. They are so lucky to have you, which was a very sweet and kind thing to say, but a very frightening thing to say at the same time. And I said, please don't ever say anything like that. Nothing's going to happen. And that was that. So after the loss, Scott and I had planned on having 2. So Savannah was born 3 months after we lost Baylie. As you can imagine, I was medicated and depressed and in a terrible state, but life was carrying on nonetheless. And age was a factor. And I said to Scott, if we're doing this, we've got to do it now. So 6 months later, we went back for the second embryo. Remember, we had 4. So we go for baby number 3 and we transplant this baby, and it was successful. And I had a medium booked. I tried to book with the medium earlier, and for some reason, they wanted us to wait 6 months after the loss. And I don't know anything about, I can only tell you what I've been told. So he said the reason why is that the soul needs time. I don't know, perhaps someone else knows, but the soul needs time before there's this communication can take place. I guess it goes through a life review, so he said. And he said after the life review, then she'll be more open to communicating. So I went with this. Sorry, just trying to get more comfortable here. So I booked the meeting with him, and it was absolutely mind blowing. He didn't know me at all, and he said, I just need a first name and we can do this over the phone. He came highly reputable. It was a wait for him. And I said, how can you do this over the phone? And he said, it's not you that I need to speak to. It's the spirit will come to my office and speak with me, and I will just convey the message to you over the phone. Okay, I said. So 9 o'clock in the morning, I called in and he said, you must be Shawnee. And I said, yes. And he said, this beautiful young woman with long blonde hair, she looks like she's in university, maybe in her 20s, has been sitting in my office for the last 2 hours waiting for you to call. And I thought, oh gosh. And he said, I'm so sorry. Please tell me, have you lost your daughter? And I said, yes. And he said, I knew it. I knew she was your daughter. Can I speak for her? And I said, please do. And he said, Mom, it happened so fast. I'm so sorry. It was so fast. Mom, I was roofied. And no one had said that. No one. No one knew it. We were in an investigation. We had hired a private investigator. We had not announced it publicly. It wasn't in the newspapers. We hadn't done any interviews. No one knew. My jaw dropped to the ground.
Mm.
So he continued with many messages that were very accurate. And then he said, she's showing me a baby. Is there a baby? And I said, yes. As a matter of fact, I have a 6-month-old Baylie baby right now. And he said, it's not that baby. She tells me she's in the nursery with the baby you have. This is another one. Did Baylie have a baby? And I said, no. And then he paused for a minute and he said, I know what this is. She's showing me a doorway. And I said, a doorway. And he said, this has happened to me once before. In my career for 30 years, I've only had this happen once. I had a woman come to me, her 7-year-old son had died, and she was pregnant. Are you pregnant, Shawnee? And I said, yes. No one knew. I was literally just pregnant. And he said, that's why she's showing me the baby. She said the soul it can leap. He described it, they can leap and reincarnate. And he said, she's telling me she's strong enough to do that. But he said, I don't know that she is. He said, normally it takes 2 years. I've never known this. From everything I've understood from spirit, she can't do this. I don't know if this is going to work. She says, tell her she'll know me by my eyes. So I have all these messages and I go with this. But then, shall I go on, Carol, that I miscarry?
Yeah.
Miscarry this baby. And it's devastating because I feel like it's Bailey's soul. And I think, oh my gosh, she's changed her mind. She's not coming to me. And it turns out the progesterone dose was written incorrectly on the script. Instead of 1.5 milligrams, they had handwritten it and it looked like a 0. The one was looped,
Mm.
0.5. And I showed it to the physician and he says, oh, I'm so sorry. It does look like a 0. And with that, he said we would do another transfer for free. But it didn't matter to me because we had one female embryo left. And I've lost this baby who I believe to be Bailey's soul. And I'm just devastated. And Scott doesn't want to do it again because he can't imagine going through any more pain and loss. So a year goes by and I just knew. I can't describe it. I knew, like I knew, like I knew, like I knew I had to go back for the last baby. I knew she was trying to tell me something. And we tried for the last baby, 2 failed cycles. Finally, the doctor says to me, if it wasn't just for you and what you've been through, I wouldn't do this transfer. But given that you've lost Baylie, I know you need to put your mind at ease. I know you need to put this to bed. I'm telling you right now, with an 18 millimeter uterus, there is no documented medical case in any book that this will be successful. It's never been successful. It will not work. I'm going to give it a 10% chance. I want you to come here for this transfer knowing this is going to fail. I said, okay. We went, we transferred the baby, and Serafina is here.
Mm. I love that name. How did you come up with that?
Well, Bailey's favorite name was actually Serena. My husband wasn't keen on it, and I asked her girlfriends what name they felt. There were 4 girls, and we sat at the kitchen table, and I said, I want to name this baby something Bailey would have chosen. And they said, you know what name I love is Serafina. And I said, oh, that's really pretty. And I looked it up, and it meant highest ranking angel, and I said, well, that's it.
Wow. Wow. And to come back to your the statement that the medium made. Now not knowing her background and having, read enough and feeling a connection with her because she was so strong in her gifts. To me, that's a sign that yes, uh, your ability to communicate with her would be, better. And also her ability to return quickly would be better because I look at her
Thing.
energy as more highly evolved.
Isn't that interesting?
But evidently he's going by the general information. Um, and I am a medium also. So this is one of the reasons why I can share this. I've had a few people who would say to me, I need to have a reading done very soon after someone has passed. What I do is I check in with the deceased person's soul. And if I feel a glimmer of a connection, then I know, yeah, it's okay. I don't, don't need to know the backstory, but if I just get that connection, then I know it's okay. If I don't get the connection, then I'm honest with the person and I'll say, no, it's not time yet. They need more time where
Mhm.
they are. And, we can try again later. In the last few years, I've had two people who have come back to give messages very, very quickly. And I knew it was important for them to do that because it really helped the person who was still embodied, help them on their journey. So yeah, I take all of that with a grain of salt, those
Yeah.
rules and talk to the person on an individual basis. So I just
Mhm.
wanted to share that with you. It does not surprise me at all that he was able to have such a strong connection with her
Mhm.
or that she would come back so quickly. Now,
Very
had
interesting.
you had reincarnation on your radar before
Well,
this?
I'll tell you why. Because the first baby, um, her heart started beating on the 27th of September, only because I had an ultrasound booked for that day. I went for the ultrasound. She said, well, she said, here it is. There's the heartbeat. And she said, it's really quite amazing because she said, based on your transfer date. Now, because I did IVF, 5-day embryo, they know the exact day when the heart starts beating. And she said, today is the day the heart starts beating. And I said, gosh, isn't that ironic? Because this is the day my daughter died a year ago, the day that Bailey's heart stopped beating.
Mm.
And I thought about that and I thought, gosh, that's so strange. Well, on the day of Bailey's funeral, I lost that baby. I miscarried the baby. And the dates started to become, there were just a lot of signs in my life, a lot of messages of dates that I thought, gosh, what is she trying to tell me? That combined with the medium. And then I had another message through Facebook. I had people reaching out to me on Messenger because we had been public with Bailey's story. And I had people reaching out saying, I hope you're open to this message. And again, another message about Baylie is telling me that there's a doorway for her or there's a window. I can't remember. I've written them in the book, but I have them, they start to blend together, whether it was
Yeah.
you'll know me by my eyes or um, there's a way for me to come back or things like that. And I thought, gosh, this is coming at me from so many different angles. This is so strange. So when we went back for the last embryo, this is really, really interesting. Failed cycle, failed cycle. Finally, the cycle works. And the doctor says the transfer date will be August 19th, the day that Baylie was hit, which to me is the day Baylie died. She may have died on the 27th of September, but her soul left her body
Mm.
on the 19th when she was hit by that car because there was nothing left of her. She was
Mhm.
outside of that coma. I said, I can't transfer a baby on August 19th. I can't do it. I can't put an embryo in that day. And he said, "Well, I can't believe you're changing your mind after 2 IVF cycles that didn't work." And I said, "We've got to push it off one more. I've got to push the date." So we did. We pushed it off and we transferred again later into September, which is Serafina. But I Googled it because I thought, what are the chances that a transfer date lands on the 19th of August? So if you put in the calculator a 5-day embryo transferred on August 19th, the due date of that baby landed on Bailey's birthday, May the 6th.
Mm.
You can't make that up.
Can't make that up. Again, the synchronicities. You have so many in your life, and I actually want to get to some of them. Um, the again, Bailey's precognition, I have to say, about Scott's car.
Yeah, yeah,
That is a great
yeah,
story.
yeah, yeah. So before she died, the week she was away, the first week we were down there, Florida's full of fancy cars in Miami. Well, she sends Scott a picture of a prototype of the Aston Martin 2020. It's not even been built yet. And it says Skyfall Gray, which is, 007. And she said, "Scott, this is going to be your next car." Of course, it's an ongoing joke with them. And he says, "Oh gosh, only in my dreams," right? Well, in 2020, Scott was down in Florida looking for a car because he did drive sports cars. And here we were with Savannah and trying for a second baby. And he's thinking, this is my last chance to have a sports car. So he went down actually looking for a McLaren, I think it was. And he stumbles across an Aston Martin dealership and he's wandering through, and there's this fabulous deal. And, you know, it ends up being a sticker price that shouldn't be. And the guy says, "You know what? The sticker's on it. We'll give it to you for that price." And he just can't get over the deal he's getting on this car. And he's texting me. He's like, "I feel like I'm stealing the car. Like, you have no idea the great deal I'm getting. And they're giving me unlimited miles and I can't get over this." And anyway, he gets the car, he brings it home. And a little while later, I don't know why he was looking through his text. We were looking for something, and his jaw dropped and he said, "I can't believe this. I'm looking through Bailey's texts. I'd completely forgotten about this. You won't believe it. Look at this." And he shows me the phone, and there's the car and the color and the year that he's got.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my
Yeah, there
goodness.
was so much. There's just so much of it. And what is amazing now, which isn't in the book, is where Serafina is at 4 years
Yeah.
old.
Yeah.
Let you ask me where you
Yeah.
are in the book.
And I know you've read some of Stevenson's work, so you know that he
Yes.
focused on children rather than adult cases of reincarnation, the reincarnation type. And so I wondered, you didn't talk a whole lot about that in the book, but she was younger at that point.
Mhm.
Have you seen many signs from her to let you know? I know there's a couple of things that she said that you did include in the book. Tell
Mhm.
us a little bit about that.
Oh my goodness, it's all the time now.
Oh,
All the time. She talks about it it's become so common in our house that she'll say, "When I was Bailey," and she'll tell us a story, and we just carry on like this is just normal.
oh my.
But I don't know if I wrote in the book. I feel like I didn't, but one of the really fascinating things she said to me one day is she said, "Mom, you know when when my horse died?" And I said, "Yes," because immediately I know she's talking about when she was Bailey, when my horse died. She said the trainer was running him on a leash and he didn't like the leash and he was running in the rain and that's why he slipped and that's why he broke his leg.
Oh,
And no one has said that to her.
oh
No
wow.
one. And, my heart stopped because I thought, oh my goodness, she doesn't understand what a lunge is, but she can see a leash.
Uh-huh.
and she knows that he slipped in the rain.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So
And
another mystery solved.
oh, and she says things like it's really interesting because I think it was Jim Matlock. Are you familiar? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And he said to me that memories will jump in just like boom in a moment and then it's gone.
Yeah.
You know,
Especially with kids.
she's walking around the corner and she says to me, "You know my grandpa from when I was Baylie?" And I said, "You mean Pappy? That's my dad." And she said, "No, the other one. He died young." And I said, "Oh, yes." I said, "Sean's dad." And she said, "Yeah, his name was Gerald.
Oh wow.
He died at 57, and it was Sean's father, who she's never known.
Mm,
She doesn't even know at her age that Baylie had a different father than her.
wow.
And his name was Gerald.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't believe the things she comes up with that she knows. And she'll say to me, "You know, Mom, my grandmother drinks her tea black. Can you imagine? It must be so hot." And sure enough, she does drink her tea black.
Wow. And I know you talked with Carol Bowman, so I trained with Carol,
Wow.
and I got to do a private before I trained with her. I got to do a private session with her. I had an unresolved issue that I just couldn't get through by myself, and she finally helped me get that last piece of the puzzle. So I'm really glad that you connected with her because her book, Children's Past Lives, I feel like is such a wonderful guide for
Yeah.
parents of children who are remembering. And so I'm really glad you had that connection with Carol.
Yeah, it was just through email that we chatted back and forth. I didn't actually speak to her over the phone, but it was very helpful. And
Yeah.
it really validated what was happening to us and what Serafina was conveying. And oftentimes we'll go somewhere and she'll say, "Oh, I've been here before. I was here when I was Baylie." Like
Oh, we hear that a lot.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
it's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. I don't I'm sorry I've hogged the floor here.
No,
Let me see if anyone else has any questions. We have quite a few sensitive people in our audience, and I know there were several times when you were talking that I was just absolutely covered with goosebumps. And so I wondered if anybody else had any questions or any comments that you would like to add. Please raise your electric hand or your regular hand and feel free to ask.
Think it's so wonderful that after all that horrible tragedy that you have gotten such a concrete verification and connection with Baylie. I
uh,
mean,
it is. It
you
does
know,
feel that way.
Jim Matlock, he's like the super scientist of it, and he goes well beyond what I would possibly do to verify things. So when he talks about what has happened or whatever, believe me, it's gospel. It has happened scientifically. And after speaking to him and after reading some of his book and everything, it's like, wow, this is what you're telling about is exactly what he said. That is possible, and he has verified. But it's so wonderful. I'm so happy for you,
Thank you.
Shawnee, that
Yeah,
you've gotten this wonderful gift of connection. Wow, it's just mind blowing. And I was so sad when you were talking earlier. I'm like, oh my God, how could a person survive all this with a
yeah,
child lingering and I never didn't know and all that stuff?
yeah.
But now when I hear what didn't happen right away, but it happened eventually. I mean, for us it's a long time, but for people on the other side, it's like a blink of an eye. That they
I just
they died and then they came came back, in a blink of an
Yeah.
eye. And so it's just so, so wonderful. I'm so happy for you. And
Thank you.
wow.
Thank you. And it is so fascinating, but yet I do feel like I'm in the twilight zone and I feel very alone in this. And I sometimes think I'm a bit crazy. And I just wish there was something more scientific or something that I could grab onto that could say, and I guess maybe we'll know only when we die, but why do some come back and others don't? And why did I get this and others don't? And how come Baylie was able to do a second chance? And whether was her soul more enlightened or evolved or all these questions.
Oh, you must have a million of them.
Wanted to mention I can't remember her name, Dr. Mary. She wrote a book about going to heaven. She was in a kayaking accident.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
You know who you're talking about.
Yes. And her book was fascinating too. And what I liked about hers is that um, she is open to hearing from guardian angels as messengers through Christianity. So I get tangled up in all of this because, the last thing I want to be thought of as a witch or somebody who's doing something I shouldn't or speaking to a medium and that's a wrong thing. And heavens, I just think that maybe we just aren't open enough to understanding where these messages are coming from, and maybe they're not terribly dangerous messages at all.
Well, I would just,
Tony?
Shawnee, nice to meet you. My name's Tom. I would completely reiterate everything Jim just said. It is a relatively small community. It's larger than one would think, but it is your story has all sorts of wonderful aspects to it, downs and ups, and mainly the triumph of life over death and love over despair. That's what it's really all about. And I mean, I don't know. Uh, Carol and I go back a long way in terms of other lifetimes, and I have a child who was previously in this same lifetime, my father. So so it wasn't it didn't have he didn't have the tragic kind of end that you talked about your with your daughter, but anyway, and it's not the kind of thing you share with with everybody because they just don't understand. They think you're a little wacky and so forth, but there is a community within which these things can be shared, and I would reiterate what Jim says. I, it's a wonderful story despite the difficulties you had, and it will be interesting to see how your younger version of your daughter um, is similar or different from.
Oh, she's so similar.
Yeah, but there'll be differences too, I'm sure.
Yes, yes, yes. But you know what? She'll say things to me like, Mom, I don't like raisins.
Right.
Wow. Wow.
It's like,
Yeah. So
Oh, all I would say is just to cherish these moments, of that communication with your daughter, and hope she always keeps it. But in case she doesn't, these are.
how
How
old
old
is
is
she
she
now?
now, Serafina?
she will be 5 in March.
Okay.
When she was 2. So here's the problem, because I had these insights before she was born and I was suspicious that Baylie was coming back to me. I had dreams about this baby, and I knew that the pregnancy would work despite them telling me it would be 10%. I had a dream that she would have blonde hair and blue eyes. And my husband said, "How do you know what she's going to look like?" And I said, "Because she's come to me in my dreams, and because Baylie always wanted blue eyes, and I know that's what she'll have, and she does." And I have brown eyes, so why would I think that? So, and then at 20 weeks, I had a significant bleed and I dilated to 4 centimeters, and they thought I would lose her. And they did a cerclage, and I said, no, she's not going anywhere. You'll see, she'll be fine. And sure enough, I just knew. It just so
Mhm.
strange what I knew, but I knew. But people will think that I've suggested this to Serafina, but I will tell you, I absolutely didn't say a word because I almost as though I was testing her, right? She's born with the birthmark, right where the brainstem injury is.
Mm.
And I waited and I waited and I waited to see if she would say something. And at 2 years old, she looked at a picture of Baylie and she said, Mama, that's me. And I said, no, no, that's Baylie. And she said, no, that was me when I was bigger. Yeah.
Yeah. Now they say in the reincarnation research that often children lose their memories of who they were in the other lifetime. Um, it'll be interesting to see if Serafina experiences that also. Her,
Mhm.
her, her, because of there's something more going on here. I would not be surprised if she doesn't lose the memories. And this makes me think about we do the book club 1 month and the group regression the next month. Our next group regression is going to be about soul contracts. And so I can't help but be so curious of what Serafina's soul contract is for this incarnation and what Bailey's was.
Mhm.
But, and then what the connection between the two of them are.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just put that out there to the universe because I have a feeling I'm thinking about that for a reason. Now we're coming up to the end, but I would really want you to talk about Bailey's Wish Foundation because as you mentioned earlier, what happens in universities, the safety protocols, the healthcare proxy, and then I know you guys are working on Bailey's Law. So
Mhm.
share with us more about Bailey's Wish Foundation.
So the Bailey's Wish Foundation is two-part. One, our hope is to have the forms, which you can get for free in every state, as a part of the admission process to every college. So it should just be something that's included when you're filling out all the paperwork. And if it was just submitted, if the college could have it in their forms as something parents fill out. Two things are very significant. One is the HIPAA waiver, which would have allowed us to have gotten the blood work on her. The HIPAA waiver is also a really important piece because it allows families to have access to medical records and know what's going on. I had a mother reach out to me who said, my son didn't go to class for 5 weeks and no one told us, and he hung himself in his dorm room. And if they had had the HIPAA waiver, someone would have called. But they're not allowed to tell the parents anything. So here's these 18-year-olds who are really still children. So we want that HIPAA waiver, and then the healthcare proxy, which is grants the parents. And if that child for some reason doesn't want a parent, they can list someone else, an aunt or an uncle or a close friend, but they have to put someone down as an emergency person who can make decisions on their behalf. And then the second part of the Bailey's Wish Foundation is prevention and safety. So again, this is a little bit interesting because I've always felt that there was a way. I mean, Baylie reached out to her friends right after the incident and said, something is wrong. I can't use my phone. And they said, Baylie, you've called an Uber several times today. Use your app and call an Uber and get back here. And she said, guys, there's something wrong. She didn't say it was in my water. She said, there's something wrong with me. I'm confused. I don't know how to use my phone. I can't open the app. I don't know how to call an Uber. In fact, I don't know how to use GPS. And they said, well, we're going to send you a pin for our location. See if you can open it on the text. So they sent it to her. She clicked on it. The map opened. She said, I've got it. I can open it. They said, follow the map and walk home. You're 3 miles away. Just keep walking. We'll follow you. We'll track your location on Friend Finder. And they watched her walk right into traffic. So we felt that there was a better way to either educate students on how to help someone else, or, change the laws so that they weren't so afraid of getting in trouble that they didn't call for help. To call the police or call someone and say, go pick this girl up. She needs help. But they were underage drinking, which is why they didn't call. So we came across this young man, and sure enough, he was at the University of Miami, just graduated, and he had created this incredible app called Third Eye. So I had a call with him, and I said, well, it's kind of interesting that you're from the University of Miami. Of course, my daughter went to the University of Miami, which is a common thread there. I'd love to hear more about it. Well, he created the app because there were so many incidents of students either being sexually assaulted in a rideshare or boys being dropped off on the freeway because they were drunk. And one of them had been hit by a car because he was kicked out of the Uber. So, these are things you just don't realize, the hidden dangers of college, we call them. So the app he created is really phenomenal. And I just can't support it enough. The colleges spend $90,000 a year on the blue light system, an outdated system in the parking lot that you have to walk up to, press a button, and wait for police to come. Everybody has a cell phone now. The safety apps are far superior. This boy's app uses the front and the back camera at the same time to live record the situation you're in, audio and video, and it sends the video to 911 discreetly. It allows 10 people to observe the video live, that you can add to the call. So think about this in a high school shooting, and without any noise. It's all done by text, a touch of a button. You don't have to talk to 911. You don't have to explain the situation. It also uses AI to detect threat. So if they don't think they're in trouble, but AI does, it will notify authorities, or it will notify parents through an Amber Alert ring that comes to their phone in the middle of the night that there's a problem. And the problem is because you couldn't click on it and look at the video. So, there's just so many aspects to this that we feel is beneficial to students. And especially in that age group when decision making is really poor. And you may need someone else to observe the video to say, yeah, you know what, you really are in danger. And they say, no, I'm fine. I think I'm okay. I can get out of this. And you can say, no, you can't. I'm sending a ride, or I'm calling 911. So we're trying to bring awareness to the hidden dangers, but to get that app into schools and to get funding so that we can hopefully make a change from the blue light system to providing students with something that gives them better access to help.
That's wonderful. I feel like everything that you have been through has obviously made you stronger, more consciously aware on so many different levels. And thank you so much for the courage to share your story. Like I said, there were times when I just had to put it down and have a good cry and, just be right there with you and feel the pain. So thank you for your courage to share this and for sharing with us too. Sometimes I know when I was writing, I could write things better than I could talk about them, to speak about them. It took me many more years to be able to speak about them without breaking up. So I just admire your courage on so many different levels.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And I also want to say, as horrible as this was, it feels like there's so much opening up for you, your family, Serafina especially, and that Bailey's not done.
Thank you.
Yeah. With I'm gonna uh put it back to gallery and in any last thoughts from anyone? And then I'll ask you one last question. Um, and this might be difficult to reply in short time, but if you had to say what your takeaway from all of this experience has been, as far as your spiritual path, what would you define as your takeaway?
That this is just one step in a long, long journey, and that we're only temporarily here. I'm
Yeah.
not afraid of death anymore. Um,
Yeah.
and I feel like we're all connected. I really do. I feel like we're all connected. I can't tell you how many connections I have had through the book, full circle. One just the other day, the babysitter was a student at UNH. She was babysitting Serafina when I was writing the book 2 years ago. She's reading the book. She sent me a message. She said, Shawnee, this is like the invisible string. You will not believe where I'm working right now. And she said, I am currently a registered nurse in the unit where Baylie was at Mass General, and I work with Dr. Int'l. And
Oh
she
my
was our
goodness.
babysitter when she was young.
Oh my. Yeah.
So
I
I
love
just feel like this is just a big loop where we are all connected one way or another, and nothing is an accident.
Yes. And it really makes us say, appreciate every moment that we have, doesn't it? And
Mhm.
so I'm so grateful for all the moments you have shared with us. And I felt the connection the first post I saw on Facebook, and
Thank you.
I held back, and then finally I was like, nope, I've got to reach out. And so thank you again for talking with us and sharing your story.
Thank you, Carol. And thank you, everyone. It was nice to meet all of you. I appreciate you hearing my story.